This is Rogers TV, Barrie.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Money Matters with Shannon Jackson, the personal finance show focused on moving you forward financially. Summer is finally here, the season to kick back, relax, and be carefree. But considering the current economic climate, you may want to be careful when it comes to your summer spending, especially if it means taking on some additional debt. And joining me now with advice on how you can still have some summer fun and avoid incurring more debt, we have Kirsten Bradley, Senior Insolvency Administrator with BDO Debt Solutions. Kirsten, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Shannon, for having me. I look forward to talking about summer and hopefully everybody will have a wonderful one this year. Well deserved.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Now, before we get into our sort of main discussion, can you talk to us a little bit more about BDO Debt Solutions and what your role is as a Senior Insolvency Administrator?
Perfect. Well, BDO Debt Solutions is a firm that actually we've been around for over 100 years now, helping people in various different ways. But Debt Solutions is really focusing on helping people to go through their budget, to assess what's coming in, if they're struggling with debt, and be able to come up with a plan that's going to help them move forward. So we look at a variety of different options. Sometimes I have people come in and really what we're looking at is just doing budgeting. I mean, sometimes really going down to the basics. Other times we might have to look at something more of a consolidation, a consumer proposal, or potentially a bankruptcy. These are, these are great ways to be able to help someone.
Absolutely. And does anyone have to sort of pay to get your services, or how does that work?
No, our services are free. So if you want to come in and just meet with one of our administrators or a trustee, I do work with licensed insolvency trustees. So we know that what is happening is actually sort of federally regulated and you are protected. But to meet, to just go through a budget or have that conversation, and sometimes you just need to have that conversation. You need to be able to actually share with someone else, look at this is what's going on. The number of people who come in and feel like they're so overwhelmed, they're not sleeping, they're not answering the phone. All of these things are happening, and this is a way for them to be able to come up with a solution that's going to actually allow them to move forward.
Wow, we're going to be talking a little bit about heading into our summer months and how we're going to handle our finances over these coming months. Now, as much as we want to make the most out of this warm weather, I think we do need to be conscious of our summer spending. But of course, the last thing we want to do is pay for all of that summer fun after the season is over, of course.
Of course. No, summer can be expensive. We know that, everybody wants to be outside. We want to be doing things. We've spent a long, cold, Canadian winter inside, and now we wanted to reap the benefits. Along with that, we've got our kids who are now home. So we don't have them going off to school 5 days a week. So we're looking at the expense growing when it comes to looking at daycare or other camps, etc. And even right now, when we look at our current economic sort of situation in Canada, we all know that cost of things are going up. Just go to the grocery store, fill your tank with gas. All of those things, we see that the cost is rising. Our interest rates are rising. And people who even, people who have never struggled financially before are really starting to feel the burn right now. They're becoming a little more dependent on credit cards. They're becoming more dependent on lines of credit or kind of overextending themselves. And unfortunately, we have to figure out a way to spend less to save more.
You're so right about the expenses that seem to come up just in the summer months with extra childcare if your child is younger, and they're out of school now. Maybe you're planning for a summer vacation, or there's some social things that you're going to be participating in. So it seems like the summer months do bring on these extra expenses that perhaps maybe we weren't planning for. Now, there's been some recent surveys that show that many Canadians, including many here in Ontario, they are rethinking their summer plans this year. There was a recent poll from Ipsos that said about 62% of Canadians are scaling back on their vacation plans due to inflation. And about 58% think that it's actually likely they won't be able to go on a vacation this year. And unfortunately, about 24% say that there is really no way that they can afford a summer vacation this year. Now, the poll also shows that of those that are saying that they really can't afford a vacation, 8% of them, I think, are going to be doing this anyway. And taking that vacation, which unfortunately means that they're probably going to be putting extra strain on their finances, probably by putting themselves into debt. And of course, if you've been searching for flights lately, these costs have obviously increased. So it's no wonder that many people are reconsidering their vacation plans. And this is also likely a reason why we're seeing that more are considering doing that road trip vacation as opposed to maybe flying someplace. There was another poll conducted by Angus Reid for Toyota that said 74% of Canadians are planning a road trip this summer. However, nearly half, about 43% of those are saying that the rising gas prices have impacted how far they plan on traveling this year. About 8% have actually outright canceled their trips altogether because of the rising cost of gas. And about 35% say that they'll look for other ways to cut costs. So they'll still take the road trip, but they'll look for other ways to cut costs to sort of compensate those high gas expenses. So both surveys really are indicating that the high impact of the inflation and rising expenses are really taking their toll on Canadians, and particularly when we're making our summer's plans. But scaling back and being cautious about our spending doesn't mean you can't have fun this summer. And there are ways to have sort of a carefree summer, but without having to be careless about our finances. And creating that summer budget, I think, is really the first step. So Kirsten, can you talk to us about the importance of that budget? And do you have any advice on how somebody can get started on making that?
Definitely. Setting a budget, and really any time of year, it's important to be budgeting. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people are either afraid to do so because they don't want to see the reality of what they're spending, or they just don't have the sort of tools to be able to do that. So when it comes to budgeting, we need to start from the very beginning and start from the very basics to look and really track what are we spending, what are our expenses. Often when we think about our income, we're not thinking about, the variable sort of pieces that can come into play when it comes to our income, having to take some vacation days, having to, sick days, any of those things. So tracking that income, understanding what's truly coming in is the first step, and then beginning to break down those expenses. We have expenses that we can easily track, and we often call those our fixed expenses because we know that every month we're going to pay the same for our rent or our mortgage. We're going to pay the same for our car payments or our insurance, and those things are easy to track, but it's those variables. Those variable expenses, those are the ones that are harder, especially as we start to see these increased costs. Our groceries, often we kind of set up an amount that we think we're going to spend for groceries, but we can often overdo that. You go to the grocery store hungry, you do all those things that, we try to tell ourselves not to do, but we get those impulse purchases. So going through and actually tracking. So when you break down that budget, you want to look at not just what do I know or what do I anticipate I'm going to spend for groceries, but you need to also put something in for the vacation, for the emergency savings. We kind of consider that the pay yourself section when it comes to breaking that down. And setting that aside and starting that process early so that when the summer comes or when that vacation or the anticipated activity happens, you've already set a goal for yourself. Don't leave it to the last minute. Plan that through so that you are breaking that down into a smaller amount over a period of time. I always say to people, if you were to come up with $1,000 savings and you think of that $1,000 that has to happen next month, where's it going to come from? But if you break it down, that's $2.75 a day. All of a sudden, you take that and stretch that budget out. So start making those plans, but start making them early so that when you look at your budget, you can see what can I afford and what time frame can I afford to make that happen.
It's interesting because you mentioned about going to the grocery store and things like that, and that just got me thinking about in our summer months, at least here in Canada, we sort of have more access to maybe those fresh vegetables and fresh fruit that are more seasonal for us, which then could maybe increase the expense that we're putting out during those summer months as well. So I think you're right. We need to think about how things change over the summer months with regards to our spending, but also you're totally right about making those plans early so that you can start to save for those, like you say, any vacations or that emergency fund as well. And it can be manageable, like you say. It can just be a $275 a month a day to put that aside towards those goals. So those are really good things to sort of give advice. Now, the summer too is sometimes a time where people might rely on their credit a little bit more in order to enjoy those summer activities. So do you have any advice on how people can avoid using their credit during the summer?
Well, that is a really important thing. And I think, obviously, when I meet with people, I try to encourage them not to use the credit at all, except for really positive methods. And when I say that, what it means is to use that for the sole purpose of what your credit's intended for. And that's to help build your credit score. So we want to use it for meaningful purposes, such as maybe paying your cell phone bill and setting it on a rotative payment that you can afford to pay in full every month. So one of the key things is don't carry your credit card. Don't bring it with you when you go to the fair or when you go on that vacation. It's so easy now to use the technology that's been given to us when it comes to our tap or our Apple Pay or all these things that they've done. And why have they made it so easy? So that we spend more. They want us to have that convenience because it's so easy to walk into a store and just tap that and not account for what I've just spent. So not carrying that, not hooking it up to your Apple Pay or to another convenience that makes spending so easy. Looking also at as I said, the right choices for why we're using the card. Using it, yes, to build up the credit. Using it, yes, potentially to get those extra points when it comes to, grocery points or vacation points that maybe we are using. But the key is every month, if I cannot pay that bill in full, I'm not going to make that purchase. That's the way we need to use that credit card. If you're saving for a vacation, you're going to put your flight on that card, have the money put aside so that all you're doing is you're making that purchase and you're transferring the payment right away so you're not carrying a balance.
Yeah, I agree. I always tell people that they can use their credit, just like you say, the purpose of to rebuild their credit or to keep their credit score in good standing. But use the cards for things that perhaps you would already be spending money on, like your groceries or your cell phone bill, like you mentioned, instead of putting those high purchases like flights or vacation costs and things like that, and then worrying about having to pay those costs later because suddenly those expenses become much larger when the interest rate kicks in on them. So I always tell people if you can treat a credit card like a 30-day loan and pay off the balance at the end of every month, you're going to be okay. So those are really good tips to help people to sort of avoid stepping into that sort of trap as we head into these summer months. And we're going to have some more great advice coming up after the break. We talked about creating our budget. Now, sticking to it is also going to be important. And Kirsten's going to have some cost-saving tips to help you with that when Money Matters returns.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Welcome back to Money Matters with Shannon Jackson. My guest today is Kirsten Bradley, Senior Insolvency Administrator with BDO Debt Solutions. And today we're talking about summer spending and getting some great advice on budgeting and some cost-saving tips. With high inflation, rising interest rates, and the current economic uncertainty, many are reconsidering their vacation plans and summer activities, but being cautious about their spending doesn't mean you can't have fun this summer. Now, often this time of year has us comparing our opportunities to others, especially when everything gets posted to social media. We get that fear of missing out. So, Kirsten, what advice do you have on managing maybe that fear of missing out, that feeling of jealousy, or maybe even guilt?
Well, it's so true. And unfortunately, I think that's whether it's our children who hear all the buzz of what everybody else is doing and come home with that, we carry that guilt as to we can't do all the things that all their friends are doing, or even what we're seeing on social media. And unfortunately, social media seems to be the trigger right now. To see all the vacations that people are going on and the fun activities that people seem to be constantly moving forward with. So, one big thing is to try to take a social media break. Just, there's nothing wrong with not looking at what everybody else is doing for a weekend or a week or a month or whatever time frame you can handle. Because I think, obviously we all have the desire to do everything. We want to be able to, kind of experience all the different activities that everybody else is having. But having that discussion and being able to realize it's okay to just do what you're able to. It's not about what you're spending, it's about the memories you're making.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Those posts that you see, you don't see the background on some of those things. People post what they want you to see, and they don't talk about how much it actually costs them to do those activities, or maybe the strain that they're going to feel after the activity is over. And it's so tempting to get caught up in the excitement and things like that. But those are some really good tips on how we can maybe avoid having those feelings of that fear of missing out. Now, before the break, you talked about the importance of creating that summer budget, but having the budget in place is really just the first step. We really sort of need to stick to it as we move forward. So what advice do you have on how we can still have fun this summer, but staying within our planned budget?
So you've got to come up with some summer solutions. And, yes, the budget is key. And some people, the sort of average between what they can afford or what one person versus the next is very different. So looking at some solutions that might work for you, things like staycations. Yes, there's those road trips and but there's so much to do in our local area. There's so many activities that we can be involved in. So going through and checking online or checking the local papers to see what kind of activities are actually happening in your area. Looking at the markets. Going down to some of the local markets is, obviously it's going to help with the cost of some of the groceries as well when you're buying local and you're not spending quite the same amount, but also fairs and festivals. There's so many of these that are happening every weekend, especially in Simcoe County. We have a lot of things to offer when it comes to weekends full of activities. There are tons of free events. Being able to look at some of these and find the locations such as parks or hikes. Some of the communities are doing free local outside movies. So to be able to pack up and go and experience that where you're out, you brought your snacks, maybe you grab them from the dollar store, you've found a solution that's going to be cost efficient. And that really goes for any travel. Packing and planning so that you're cutting back on some of those costs. Often, we feel like we need to hit every restaurant and we need to have every kind of outdoor experience when it comes to those costs, but picnics. There's nothing wrong with packing a lunch, having a picnic, being outside, enjoying the sunshine, enjoying this beautiful weather that we're finally having, and being able to experience that. But you also want to look at things such as our household expenses. Everyone wants to have that beautiful garden. but can you afford that beautiful garden? Do you want to sort of maybe pick a couple things at a time? Doing little things to save money, such as, barbecuing instead of running our ovens, or our air conditioners not pumping constantly, pausing our gym membership. If we're already outside doing stuff and we're not hitting the gym because nobody wants to be inside when the weather's so beautiful, let's hike instead of use the gym. So put a pause on those memberships if we're not using them. And that can go for television as well. If you know you're not going to be around, you can put a temporary pause on any of your local streaming or your cable packages. Don't be spending the money for something that you're not using. There's nothing wrong with that. Even to make some money, what about a garage sale? All of a sudden, we have the perfect opportunity to be able to actually go through and make a little bit of money. Maybe that money that's being made becomes the money that you're using for that perfect summer getaway. So getting creative and finding those things that are going to make your memories and your family happy while experiencing, the beautiful summer that we finally are experiencing.
I love that you said about taking the opportunity to have that garage sale. That's a really good idea. And as you were talking about having the, packing that picnic to take with you as opposed to going out to the restaurant, an instant memory came to me where it was always a road trip with our family, and it was egg salad sandwiches in the car, and that was always what we had. And as basic as that is, that's a memory that I have that I is really important to me. So I think especially maybe as parents, we wanted to do all of these great things with our kids. But I mean, speaking from experiences, it's those little things that we do as a family that stick with you in the memories. So I think those things are really special. Now, speaking of sort of being parents, summer can come with a little bit more pressure. Not only you experience our own sort of fear of missing out, but our children do as well. Like you say, they'll be talking with their friends and hearing about their experiences. And of course, we as parents, we want to provide our kids with as much as we possibly can, but perhaps the summertime can be an opportunity for parents to maybe talk to their kids about money and spending. So, Kirsten, do you have any advice for parents on how they can involve their kids in the summer planning and maybe at the same time teach a little bit about some financial literacy?
For sure. Summer, just because school's out doesn't mean that the learning needs to stop. And I think, when we think about budgeting, so many people that I've met with, one of the things they always say is, I wish I'd known this when I was younger. I wish I'd experienced this when I was younger. And as parents, we need to be the ones that facilitate that. We need to be able to encourage our children to understand, no, they don't need to carry the weight of our financial burdens of what's happening, but they can be very much a part of our planning. And that planning can actually really help when it comes to making those decisions, when it helps to come to the term of what can we afford to do as a family. Because I think sometimes as kids, we think, well, I want to be able to do this. And it's only me, it's only $20, it's only what, but when you have a large family and suddenly they have to realize, okay, that's, a family of 5, that's a very different price. One of the things that I have always done with my kids is I actually get them involved in that process. I help them to sort of look at, let's plan that goal. Let's think about what it is we want to do this summer. We can only do so much. We know we can't afford to do everything that they want. So they have that kind of group family meeting where we go through and decide, is it Canada's Wonderland? Is it Ripley's Aquarium? What is it that they really want to do? What's the top priority? And then I make them become involved in that. So being able to get them to do the research with you so that they see what that cost is, so that they come up with a plan. And maybe we can't do it in July, but if we save enough, we can do that in August. So looking at ways to kind of work around that plan. And then they become involved in saying that decision, if you hit the dollar store, and of course, especially younger kids, it's just, but can I just have a couple dollars? But if you say to them, well, our goal is to try to do this activity. What if we use that money and we put it towards that activity, and we can take that activity a little bit faster, or they get to make some choices. And having that choice and understanding helps them to understand what you're going through. They see a little bit more as to the reality of what their parents actually have to afford to be able to take care of. So get them involved in that activity.
I like that idea with having them or show them that there is a choice. And especially when it comes to maybe smaller children, and having a visual there where you can say, this is our goal. We want to do Ripley's Aquarium next month. And if you make it visual, you could create the jar, put the picture of the aquarium on the jar, and then you can start getting them involved to say, okay, here's some money for maybe the chores you did around the house. You can go to the dollar store, or do you want to go to the aquarium? And if you do, we can put that in the jar, and then they can see that increasing as you go along, which can be motivating, especially for younger children. So those are some really good ideas. Now, for some of our viewers, the mere thought of summer and maybe the added expenses that can come along with it, it can create some financial stress. Do you have any advice on how to handle this stress through the summer months?
Well, I think, obviously, as we talked about earlier, sitting down and going through that budget, and it really is something that needs to be done constantly, and it shouldn't be something that we're afraid to do. We need to be able to feel empowered when we go through that budget. But if you're feeling that stress and you're finding that, there's just no way, and I have maxed out my credit cards, and I have the very idea of having to add something else to my plate is too much, then, it really is the time to reach out and speak to a professional, talk to somebody. Maybe it's a matter of a fresh set of eyes looking at that budget and saying, oh, did you realize you're spending this? Did you realize that this is what's happening? Because those little expenses, they add up so quickly. And that can be sometimes the trigger to say, oh, I didn't realize, and now I can change that. So speaking to someone, and if it comes down to it, coming to see someone like myself from BDO or a licensed insolvency trustee to be able to sit down and go through that budget together, come up with a plan, and actually begin to feel some financial freedom.
Well, we only have about a minute left, Kirsten, and I appreciate all the advice that you're giving me. Do you have any final thoughts for our viewers?
Well, I want everybody to obviously have an incredible summer, and to know that, again, as I keep saying, and it's so important, it's not about what you're spending, it's about the memories you're making. And just, having that, your kids won't tell you how much that trip cost, but she'll tell you about, the laughter that they had together. So keeping that in mind, and have a wonderful summer.
And if viewers want to get in touch with you, maybe get some advice for you or meet with you, how can they connect with you?
So they can call 1-855-BDO Debt, and that's our 1-800 number. They can go onto our website, which is bdodebt.ca, or they can email me directly at kbradley@bdo.ca.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Kirsten. I really appreciate all of your expertise and your advice. And as always, I want to thank you, our viewers, for watching. Until next time, I'm Shannon Jackson.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
Online betting is booming. Booyah! Woo! Oh yeah! You can win big! But you could also lose. There is risk with online gambling, and that's a reality nobody's shouting about. Learn about safer play at knowtherisks.ca.
You're watching Rogers TV, Barrie.